I realized that real estate was a wealth amplifier. It was something that I had far more control over, and it gave me access, to really the most powerful financial tool of all. It's leverage, right? And without leverage, without real estate, without assets that provide leverage, you're in a 40-year game. With leverage, you can shrink your timelines and do something that takes most other people 40 years with their fingers crossed. You could do it in 10 years or less. And so that's how I got into real estate. And within 4 years, I bought 17 single family homes. I still own some of them right down in your neck of the woods. I own properties in Phoenix, Arizona. I bought after the dip out there. They've been phenomenal assets. But with 17 properties, 4 years later, I quit my six-figure job. And, we can talk more about how I did that and what that felt like and all of that. But that was the framework. For me, it was single-family homes, simple, boring, buy and hold single-family homes.
And I think the other thing, Ryan, is before we jump off of this, there's an illusion of control when you're an employee, right? And that a lot of people, they believe that they're in control. And in other words, because of that paycheck, and we all have that beat into our head, work hard, work hard, get a paycheck, and buy stuff essentially. But at the end of the day, what you did was you jumped out of the illusion of control and you actually took control of your money. Because the one thing we all know is no matter who you're working for, no matter how good you are, obviously, if you're good, you're probably going to stay there. But if the employer has a hiccup, you could be in trouble.
Totally.
And so the control is, in my opinion, an illusion. Because when you jump out and you start getting in, I always call it, you go from the bay into the ocean, right? When you have a job, you're in the bay. When you go outside of that into, what Kiyosaki would call the fast track, let's say, then you're now actually taking control, and you actually, in my opinion, have the most control. Because right now, like you, Daniil, me, we're doing this to help educate, and we're having fun. We're, obviously we're entrepreneurial. We're buying more stuff. We're writing books. We're just having a blast. But Daniil has no real financial stress because it's covered with her passive income.
Totally.
Right? Like, just like you, just like me, right? So there's something that's magical when you have a lot of passive income coming in to cover all of your bills for your entire family. It just goes away.
I do.
Oh, sorry.
I do have a question. I know people were listening and, you had said buying 2 homes a year and you bought 17 homes. I know the pushback is going to be, you bought those very inexpensively and things are very different now with the prices of homes being so high. So how would you push back on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Here's what I'll tell you. I had no money. I mean, that's the best part of leverage within real estate is there's all kinds of ways to do real estate. So 2 ways, here's how I did it. All my money was trapped still in my 401k. Like I couldn't take that money out. Now, I did take money out of my brokerage account. I stopped contributing to that, and that allowed me to buy a couple of homes. But I wasn't making big bucks. I was only a couple years out of college, right? And so the way I got going really are 2 ways. Number one, I wanted financial freedom. I had a desire that, and I think Kiyosaki talks about this, but any entrepreneur has to solve this problem. It's not how, like it's if you can't do it, it's how can I actually do it? It's not, I don't have enough money, so therefore I have to wait. It's getting more creative, getting more resourceful. And so for me, 2 things happened. Number one, I went into partnership, right? I studied voraciously. I found out all of the ways I could gain access to deals. And I went into a partnership with my brother. He had money, I had hustle. And so we bought all of the properties that we bought in Arizona. I bought using his money, my credit, my hustle. The second thing that I started doing is, again, a form of leverage. And I did this in 2 different ways. I got into real estate actively. I flipped 3 properties. And I'll be honest with you, the first property I flipped, I'll just give it straight up. It was dumb luck. I mean, I made some money and I walked around with my chest all puffed out. I'm a real estate investor, right? The second house I broke even. On the third house, I lost money. And so I realized, man, I don't really want to wake up and flip houses. I'm not really that good. I can't tell, the difference between a white wall and a blue wall. I mean, for me, that's like, it just makes no difference to me. And so, I stopped flipping houses after that. But the second thing I did is I actually started a side hustle. once I knew how to make money, and my whole goal today and then, even though I didn't have words to define it, I wanted to convert my fake dollars that I didn't really have control over. Just like you said, Ken, they were laying people off left and right after 2008. Companies were tightening their belts, and I'm looking around me, and now all my coworkers are losing their job, and I'm picking up their responsibility. So I wanted to convert those dollars I didn't have control over into assets that I did. And so I started a couple side hustles, and I found ways to make more money, kind of like you, Daniil. I was willing to sacrifice. I was willing to grind. I was willing to work a couple jobs. I just wanted to turn dollars into assets. And the cool part about it is once I started seeing that cash flow stacking up, it started to make sense to me. Like if one house can pay a car payment, then 5 more houses can pay a mortgage. And if 5 more houses pay a mortgage, then I need 3 more on top of that to cover my food. And I just started measuring every decision I was making with how do I buy assets that generate cash flow to cover the expenses that right now are being covered by my active employment. That was how I started playing the game. And, I'll never forget when I actually quit my job. I didn't actually intend to quit. I'd been buying houses for 4 years, had 17 properties, and now I'm living in a different state. My corporate job kept me moving all over the place. And my boss, Rob, showed up. Now, I knew there was a problem because Rob only showed up when one or two things were going on. Like I was in trouble or he was going to have me take on more responsibility. And so I'll never forget that day. I walk out of my office, there was Rob. Rob walks me back into my own office and he sits in my chair at my desk and I'm sitting across from my desk as Rob's telling me about this quasi promotion that he's going to give me, but they just closed 2 more or they just fired 2 managers and I'm going to take over 2 more territories. I own Denver. That's where I'm living now. Now I have to travel to Wyoming, have to travel to South Dakota. And without going into some backstory, I had made a commitment to my family a couple years back. I'm done traveling. I had some family issues that, put me in a precarious spot. And so here Rob is telling me in order to keep my job, I got to go back out on the road. And I'll never forget that moment because it did feel like kind of that Charlie Brown moment. He was talking, but it sounded like wah, wah, wah in the background. And I was just adding up my cash flow over and over and over again. I'd never actually stopped to do it at that point. And without meaning to, without intending to, I told Rob I quit. Right. And I'll never forget when those words came out of my mouth. I wanted to pull them out of the air and pop them back in my mouth. I didn't mean to quit that day. But as soon as I did it, as soon as I got over the shock that I just told Rob I quit, a weight fell off my shoulders. Now, when I quit, I couldn't replace my lifestyle. I couldn't travel around the world, but I had enough cash flow coming in that I knew I could keep the lights on. I knew I could keep food on the table, and it opened up a doorway of possibility for me that it was probably always there. I just couldn't see it. But with enough cash flow coming in to cover my basic needs, like I quit that job and it started everything for me. And that really solidified the point of when I own assets that generate monthly income, I have more options in life. And I really believe that's the greatest intrinsic value that money can provide is just more control over your time and more options with what you do with that time.
What was Rob's next move?
It was so funny. He was taken so off guard. He tried to offer me more money, but I should tell you whose real next move was super funny. He tried to offer me more money, but as soon as I said I quit, man, it felt like I was free. I'd never felt that. Not since before college. I'd never felt as free as I did in that moment, but I still had one important thing I had to do. I went into the office that day with the intention of going to work and earning my paycheck, and here I am now, unemployed. I had to go out in the parking lot and call my wife, right? And I call up my wife, and this is how you know you're married to someone amazing. I called her up and I said, hey Beth, I just quit. There was a little bit of silence on the other end of the phone, and then she responded back with the best line ever. Oh man, I laugh every time I say it. She said, Ryan, it's about damn time.
Yeah.
And that started our entire adventure of what we're doing today. But that opened up a really massive possibility for me.
I'm glad you told that story because I think a lot of people are in various stages of what we just explained, right? And it appears risky, right? But to your point, when you followed a system and then you got to that 17 houses, you actually had the leverage, right? So it's almost like getting out of a relationship that you're trapped in, right? Yeah. And you were able to do that. And congratulations, that's a great story.
Back to the sweat equity piece, because I think, even myself, it took me a long time to wrap my head around this because Ken always says, you don't need any money to buy real estate. And I remember for a long time hearing that and not fully believing it, but it is true because there's people that have a lot of money and they don't have time or they don't want to invest their time into, real estate. And then there's people that will dive into real estate and have all the time in the world, but they don't have any money. And when the two of those people meet, that can be amazing. And you had your brother to help do it, and it was a win-win situation. So I always like to harp on that because I know a lot of people don't believe that.